Today's episode is brought to you by RockAuto.com. Amazing selection and reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need. Visit RockAuto.com and tell them Locked On MLB sent you.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you can check right there if you're watching on the YouTubes. You can always call me Sully. You can tell we're doing this from the classroom today, and we're going to be taking Connor Newcomb to school from Locked On Orioles. We're doing a crossover today because I have questions about the newest sensation in baseball, Adley Rutschman, and possibly the future of the Orioles. Will they be good again? Will we be partying like it's 1983? We're going to find out, but you can find out where we are on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pods. Same handle for Instagram. Thanks so much for making this your first listen, as we're available on all your free podcasts and catchers. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. You know, sometimes when your team is not very good, the arrival of a big prospect can kind of give a little bit of life to a season, give it a little bit of boost. And no, I'm not leading into a Built Bar ad read. I remember the 1987 Red Sox were not a very good team, but it was the emergence of Greenwell and Burks and Todd Benzinger and a bunch of other players who went on to eventually help them win a division title. Sometimes this is a fun time to root for a team because you're like, oh man, things might get good. Well, the arrival of Adley Rutschman already led to a couple of exciting moments for the Baltimore Orioles. But who am I to talk about it? I've already talked about it in a previous episode, but I wanted to bring in the great Connor Newcomb from Locked On Orioles. Ooh, wrong background, everyone. There's the right background. Sometimes Sully hits the wrong button. I'm trying to produce and do a podcast. I can't shut up. Connor Newcomb, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, it's a lot of jobs to do. It's producer, it's host, it's, you know, you got to play comedian on here sometimes, and it's a lot of things to juggle.
Yeah, a lot of things to juggle. We got to sell some Built Bars. We got to sell some athletic greens, all these sort of things. And you know what? Sometimes I feel like an engine needs to have the hood popped, which is why I go to rockauto.com. We're not doing an ad read quite yet. Hey, Connor Newcomb, pulling back the curtain a little bit, we are recording this in the Wednesday afternoon in California. And right now, the Orioles are playing the Yankees. The Orioles lost a heartbreaker last night in extra innings. As Trevino got the walk-off hit in the 11th or 12th, I can't remember, whatever it was not the 10th. But I have to say, the Orioles have looked like they're a smidge better than a 100-loss team. And, this is proverbial baby steps, but I think the arrival of Adley Rutschman, one of the top prospects in baseball, has given this team a little bit of a jolt and a little bit of excitement. So, you're in Orioles land. Tell us a little bit of what's going on here.
Yeah, I think there are at least a couple of smidges better than last year. I mean, 52 and 110 is not a good record. If people were not aware, that's bad. That's pretty bad. And it's sadly not as bad as it's gotten because the O's won 47 games in 2018. Yeah. But, they are still in last place. Now, granted, they are in, if not the best, then the second best division in baseball. And in terms of winning percentage, they've played the toughest schedule so far this year as we hit here towards the end of May. And they've held their own. And Adley Rutschman certainly helped. I mean, listen, he hasn't set the world on fire. He just singled in his first at-bat tonight as we're talking. And that is his third hit since being called up on Saturday night. So it's not like he is actually his fourth hit, but still he's not mashing the baseball. But at the end of the day, he gives them better defense behind the plate. He gives them a great player to put in the middle of the lineup. And the reason why the Orioles right now are not looking like the doormat dumpster fire that they were last year is that this team can pitch. Mm-hmm. And the team last year certainly could not. Now, it's helped that they moved the wall back in left field at Camden Yards. It's helped out the pitchers. But guys like Jordan Lyles, who he was basically a human pitching machine in Texas last year, He's been pretty solid this year. John Means has had Tommy John surgery. Hasn't really mattered for the Orioles rotation. They've still been good. The bullpen has been great. And as you said in the open, it can be fun when you see those prospects coming up. It's almost a really fun time because there's still no pressure on the team to win this year. So everything they do is with house money. But because the top prospects are all coming up this year, it's like, the Orioles could win 70 games with no pressure. And then you start thinking, oh, maybe next year things get watchable again.
Here's the thing that makes this team interesting from my point of view. First of all, and I don't think most people know this because I don't mean to insult the good folks of Baltimore. I've enjoyed my time in Baltimore. I love the Wire. But you take a look at their bullpen. Their bullpen's actually pretty good. Tate has pitched well. Lopez has pitched well. Batista has pitched well. Aiken has pitched well. This guy, I've never heard of him. I can't even guess how to pronounce his name. Perez
Cionel Perez. Yeah, he's pitched well.
He's been great. He's only let up, as of this recording, he's let up 1 earned run in 14 innings, and he struck out 15 batters for his troubles. So I've never been a major leaguer. I want to, first of all, dispel that rumor. I've never been a major leaguer. But I can't help but think that when you are trying to develop a young team and you have a garbage bullpen and they wind up losing games where the team's trying and they're struggling to get back and then the bullpen blows the game, I can't help but think that has to be demoralizing, especially for young players. And if you have a good bullpen and you scrap something together and you pull off a win, you got to think that's got to build up your confidence. And the fact that the Orioles do have some good young hitters on the team, like Mountcastle, like Austin Hayes, like Santander, like Cedric Mullins, and then those guys are scrapping, and then all of a sudden they hand the ball over to the bullpen. No, they're not going to make the playoffs this year. But if you're building this up and you're trying to build a sense of confidence of the team, that's got to be something that's important.
Yeah, I mean, and over the last couple of years in this rebuild, the Orioles have actually had solid bullpen arms, but it's funny because each year they've had solid bullpen arms. Their bullpen's been okay in the first half, and they've dealt all of their bullpen arms at the deadline, which some of those trades have actually worked out so far. They've gotten better prospects than you should for relievers in those deals. But then in the second half of the season, things become an absolute disaster. And the thing about this year's bullpen is the last couple of years, it's been good veteran guys, some holdovers from when the team was good last time that they were just kind of dealing off. It's a lot of young guys pitching well, and they're not guys who are going to be traded because they want them to be around over the next couple of years. Jorge Lopez is the veteran of the bunch. He's a converted starter who's now
he's under 30. He's
and he's the veteran. He's the veteran guy. But he's throwing 99-mile-per-hour sinkers. Felix Bautista spent 9 years in the minors, finally gets to the majors this year and throws 101 miles an hour. And so you've got all these guys. And Keegan Aiken, failed starter last year. He's pitched the most innings of any reliever, strictly bullpen innings. He leads the majors this year, and he's got like a 1.2 ERA. So, I mean, guys are pulling it off.
Yeah, and I think it's important if you take a look at some of these players, and if Perez sticks around, if they don't trade everyone away in a fire sale obviously it's clear if you have a veteran reliever who you have no intention of signing to a long-term deal, whatever part you get, because every team going to the postseason needs bullpen depth. Of course you're going to do that. But if you have a good, solid young bullpen that helps build up the conference's team, they could have that. Like you were saying, they traded away the O'Days or whoever it is at the deadline in the past, and all of a sudden you look up and they've got, I think I pitched in relief a couple of years ago for them. And so naturally you're going to have some games where the bullpen blows it and some of that confidence goes right to the cesspool. Imagine if you have a full year and you're building some of the confidence of this team up. And we'll get to Rutschman in a second here, but you're building this confidence up, and the Mountcastles and the Mullins and all of them feel like their game-winning rallies did not go for naught. Then you're going to go into next year where everyone has a year of experience under their belt. And maybe then, because some of the teams that are ahead of them in the American League East could stumble. They could get a year older. They could face injuries. They could underachieve. And the Orioles, if they have a decent core of people, it would be kind of like the 2012 Nationals. And I'm going to bring them up again when we talk about Rutschman, that suddenly you could see a team contend ahead of time. The Nationals did in 2012, the Rays did in 2008. And I think the key is to build a solid young team that comes together next year with a year of playing under their belt.
Yeah, and it's going to help them to continue to just get to know each other and,
Right.
build a bullpen. And that's the great thing about specifically this bullpen is that, I look around the pen and I could maybe see like one of these guys could be dealt at the deadline if the Orioles get the perfect package. But just because of the amount of years of control they have on all these players, there's no reason to trade any of these guys. And they're pitching so well. You look at the Orioles team, you mentioned that 11-inning loss on Tuesday night. That was their first extra inning loss of the year. I believe they were 5-0 going in extra innings. And that's all because that bullpen has time and time again not even allowed the zombie runner to score from second base. And that's pretty impressive. Like, good relievers allow that run to score a lot of the time. So it's been nice because the Orioles, back in the mid-2010s, they were built on home runs and a dominant bullpen. And you would just see, Mark Trumbo or Chris Davis or Adam Jones hit 2 home runs. You get a 1-run lead, and then you turn it over to O'Day and Zach Britton and those guys. And we don't exactly have the, prime Chris Davises and the Adam Joneses in the lineup yet. But the bullpen is starting to kind of look like that. And it does feel nice that when you're leading after 7 innings, you can kind of feel a little confident.
Yeah. And, a team like this, when they're making repairs and they're sort of tinkering with it, some of these repairs are going to make the entire engine of this team run perfectly. And if you need your engine to run perfectly, head on over to rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait for the person behind the counter to just order the parts on their computer, choosing the brands that the warehouse happens to carry? Why would you do that? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business and has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution for your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com. See all the parts that are available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. They're at rockauto.com. Hey, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. For your next listen, make that Locked On Orioles. For your third listen, check out Locked On Now, recaps of Major League Baseball games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are doing the Locked On MLB, Locked On Orioles crossover with friend of the podcast, Connor Newcomb. Now, Connor, the Orioles have some very good prospects in their system. Grayson Rodriguez is floating around there. The unfortunate name DL Hall is somewhere floating around there. Gunnar Henderson's out there. But the big one that all the John the Baptists in Baltimore were screaming about, Adley Rutschman, has come. Prepare ye the way for Adley Rutschman, who tripled in his first game, scored a game-winning run and a walk-off hit. And I talked about this in a previous podcast, gave us 2 really fun human moments. The video clip where they sent around where he was told he was called up to the majors and all of his teammates at, where is it Bowie? What's the name? Where's their AAA team?
AAA Norfolk.
Norfolk, thank you, Norfolk. I knew it was relatively near there. That used to be the Mets AAA franchise. But that was a wonderful clip, as was the clip of him just before his first inning of work behind the plate, where he was just kind of looking around and soaking it in. And we're going to get in a little bit of what his talents are and what he's going to mean to the team. But for me, this is the sort of thing that baseball needs to do more of, and that's to humanize some of these players, get us to feel like I was very touched by that. That I felt like, wow, this guy is soaking it in. This guy has checked off probably the biggest dream he ever had, which is to be a major leaguer. And here he is, and he's loving it. And baseball needs to embrace a little bit more of that if they want to get some viewers who, as I mentioned on the podcast I did with Miller Thomas, that I can get into Top Chef where they're cooking food I'm never going to eat if the storylines are compelling. And Adley Rutschman so far is a compelling storyline.
Yeah, he's engaging. He said it after the game. He said multiple guys kind of told him to soak it all in, and that's what he did, and it was a very cool moment. And of course, he gets the triple for his first hit, which was interesting as well for the Orioles because a couple other guys who get tripled for their first career hits, Matt Wieters and Manny Machado. So that was kind of an interesting crew for him to join. But the other thing with Adley, you'll see it if you watch him catch any day. He catches the final out, whether it's a strikeout, whether it's a fly out, a ground out. He walks, instead of walking to the dugout like most catchers do, pitcher heads to the dugout, catcher goes to the dugout. He heads up the line, either the first or third base line, and meets his pitcher on the line to either congratulate them or discuss the inning or just get the conversation started before they get back to the dugout. It's been something he's been doing since college. He continued to do it in the majors, and the pitchers seem to like it. And it's kind of brought a little bit of a new energy to the Orioles there as well.
Catcher is such an interesting position to be a young player because, it's the whole Crash Davis thing that you expect the catcher to be the veteran with all of, the knowledge. And so when you have a young catcher, even if I'm thinking about some other catchers who like, Posada with the Yankees, but he caught with Mike Stanley and with Joe Girardi before he really took over the reins as the catcher. Or, even Buster Posey, when he came up, they had Benji Molina there. Now, eventually they got rid of Molina and Posey took over and he won Rookie of the Year. But you had that veteran catcher, I'm having a very hard time thinking of someone who's just brought up and became the leader like that. Molina was, caught with Mike Matheny. Mike Matheny was the catcher and Molina was his backup, and eventually he took over. Now, I do know that the Orioles, obviously, they have Robinson Chirinos, who is a seasoned veteran of many, many years, but you just get the sense that they're handing the car keys over to Adley Rutschman. No offense to Robinson Chirinos, who could probably still be a fine reserve catcher and probably will give him a lot of knowledge. But I find Adley Rutschman to be fascinating because of the position he plays that requires so much knowledge of the game as well as natural skill. And you mentioned that thing, which I actually did not know about, him running up to, meet with the pitcher and the pitcher's enjoying that, make me think this could be a very special kid. And I think really the only catcher I can think of. Now, I'm sure someone's screaming at the radio or the iPod or whatever they're listening to. Man, I just aged myself. Benito Santiago with the Padres in the 80s kind of played that part. Maybe, even Piazza had some veterans along with him. I'm having a hard time thinking of someone who just stepped right in. And Rutschman could be a very special catcher along those lines.
Yeah, for the Orioles, Matt Wieters did something close to that in 2009. That I believe Greg Zahn was around, who was kind of a veteran catcher at that point. And it was kind of similar to Rutschman now where, Chirinos is a veteran, but he's just a backup at this point in his career. That was kind of the same thing with Greg Zahn and with Matt Wieters as well. Although Wieters was eased in even a little more. Adley is behind the dish and the starting catcher immediately. And he likes working with these pitchers. Obviously, it's a younger staff, some guys he caught in the minor leagues. And, the even better part is, the defensive metrics are not perfect yet, but they do have a framing stat. And Robinson Chirinos is dead last in framing in Major League Baseball right now. Adley Rutschman, one of his top skills when he was scouted was the framing. And there's these interesting numbers where you mentioned DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez, the Orioles' top 2 pitching prospects. Their ERAs in AAA this year, when Adley catches them, are like half of what their ERAs are when the other AAA catchers are back there. Some of it, I'm sure, is just luck and small sample size, but some of it matters, I think, just to have him back there. The Orioles have had some bad defensive catchers since Matt Wieters left. People talk about how good his bat is, but I mean, just the presence behind the plate might make the biggest difference for this organization.
Yeah. Well, look at this is I'm just thinking about the catcher. I mean, this has been, I'm thinking about catchers who have won Rookie of the Year. Yeah, Giovanni Soto did with the Cubs. I'm just scrolling down here. I'm at baseballreference.com, assuming we're a website in the history of the planet Earth. Mike Piazza did, Sandy Alomar Jr. did, but Sandy Alomar Jr. also kind of played a little bit with Benito Santiago before being dealt to Cleveland. Santiago was a Rookie of the Year. But, man, even just going back, it's super rare to find, you had Carlton Fisk and Thurman Munson and Johnny Bench all did, as did Earl Williams of Atlanta. But, man, you got to go back a long time to find someone who just steps right in and plays that major part. Now, of course, we're bringing up names like Mike Piazza and Thurman Munson and Johnny Bench and Carlton Fisk. No pressure, Adley. But you know what? Pressure, Adley. This is part of the gig. I mean, if you're going to be the number I think if he wasn't the number 1 prospect in baseball, he was certainly top 5.
Yep, he was number 1. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. But I'm not the host of Locked On MLB Prospects. But the fact of the matter is if you're going to have this attention and have this responsibility, this is probably the most excitement I've seen about a prospect coming up since Bryce Harper. And I remember when Bryce Harper was coming up through the Washington system, and there were people who were like checking up on him along the way. Like, he's in Hagerstown now. He's in Syracuse or wherever it was. I mean, there have been other big stars who have burst onto the stage. Certainly Chris Bryant has been one of them. Certainly Ohtani. But Ohtani is different because, again, he was a huge star already in Japan before he came over. But, Harper's arrival in 2012, there was so much excitement, and he wound up walking the walk. And that was the year that the Nationals won the division ahead of schedule. And that was the year that they made the decision about Strasburg before they knew, because the Marlins went on a shopping spree. The Phillies were supposedly the unstoppable team. The Braves barely missed the playoffs. You had 3 major teams ahead of the Nats. So they thought, all right, we're probably going to win 84, 85 games, rest Strasburg for, September, and move on. They didn't know that those other teams were going to wet the bed and that suddenly the division was going to be theirs. I'm thinking of that as the model for the Orioles, to just be prepared in case Tampa has a regression, the Red Sox lack of depth at some of their positions finally comes to catch up with them. The Rays fall back to the mean. The Yankees, every once in a while, injuries take over them, like they missed the playoffs in 13. And they missed the playoffs at 1.3 out of 4 years. To be prepared, it's like, luck is what happens when you prepare. And I think that the Orioles could, if there's going to be a situation where a team stubs their toe, this is the type of team that could, run in and take advantage of that in ways that we're not expecting.
Yeah, I don't know if this would be the year, but I think preparing for next year.
No, but that's what I mean. That yeah, I don't. This year they don't have a shot.
Right, but preparing for next year.
But they're gonna be. I think they're gonna be. This looks like a 75 win team to me.
Hopefully, and I mean, you think about something that could happen next year. I mean, you mentioned the Yankees. Aaron Judge doesn't re-sign in New York. He goes somewhere else. He goes to the National League, and all of a sudden, the Blue Jays, maybe it's not working as well as they want this year, and the Rays will always have regression, and I think the Red Sox are headed there, and maybe something does happen where even if one of those teams is still ahead of them, there's more wild card spots now. Maybe they can slip in. Maybe next year Toronto wins the division and the Orioles can slip in if they, add the right pieces to the team. But the Orioles kind of felt that in 2012, that same year. That was their first year back. And a lot of Orioles fans have said this year feels a lot like 2011, where the Orioles only won about 70 games that year. But what they did was they dominated September. Of course, they took Boston out of the playoffs on that famous game 162. And they used that momentum into 2012 when they won 90-plus games and got to the postseason for the first time in 15 years, first time since they won the division in the late 90s. So people are kind of given that, is this the 2011 team? Is next year the 2012 team when they kind of get back to it? And, be prepared.
Yeah, I remember the end of that 2011. And after that, man, so many Red Sox lost their jobs. Even Frank Kona lost their jobs. And next thing you know, they're working on their resumes and sending it out there for a new job. And I hope they used LinkedIn. With spring in the air, it's time for renewal and growth. And personally and professionally, as your small business grows, LinkedIn Jobs is here. What are they here for? I'll tell you what they're here for. They're here to make it easy to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes with LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond, with the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people, including your pal Sully. Now, add your job. Add the purple hiring hashtag frame to your LinkedIn profile. I don't know why my voice went up there. I was emphasizing, spread the word that you're hiring so you can network and find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. It's why LinkedIn is rated by small businesses #1 in developing quality hires and leading competitors. Now look at LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want, and they do it faster. Did you know that nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Hey, terms and conditions apply. We're in the middle of the crossover episode with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. Why am I singing like a Gregorian monk? Hey, Connor. A few years ago, the Orioles had supposedly one of the best trade chips out there, which was in his prime Manny Machado, who they should have traded in 2017 when he would have had a full year of control to whomever he was traded to. They didn't. Scholars and poets and sociologists for centuries to come will never be able to figure out why. When they ultimately did send him packing, the package that they got from Los Angeles, how do I say this kindly? It didn't work out as well as they had hoped. But that being said, it was Yusniel Diaz was supposed to be the big piece of that puzzle. He was the big outfield prospect in the Dodgers system, and he was the key prize in the package, that he was supposedly going to be the right-handed power-hitting outfielder that was going to roam the outfield. He was only 21 when the trade was made. He underwhelmed in 2019, no one played in 2020, was downright bad last year. And it looked like, man, was this a whiff of a trade? Well, he started off okay in Norfolk this year. And he's still in his mid-20s. He's not an old man. Now, he may not be the star that they were hoping to get, but is there hope that Diaz may turn things around and actually become a major leaguer in Baltimore?
Yeah, he's got to stay healthy. I mean, he was hurt by injuries in 2019. He was just massacred by injuries in 2021. I mean, he couldn't stay on the field when he did. He played hurt last year, and that's why those numbers were so abysmal. And this year, he's finally healthy. He starts off the season red hot, and what happens? Another hamstring injury. He goes on the injured list for 10 days, comes back, plays in one game, re-injures the hamstring, goes back on the injured list. I don't even think he's been back from that injury yet. He's almost back, I believe. But with all this time injured and all this time where he's been struggling, the Orioles have just continuously added outfielders.
Yeah.
And in the majors, they have Mullins, Hayes, and Santander, who are all playing well. They have Ryan McKenna, who is a former top 10 Orioles prospect, kind of playing that fourth outfield role in the majors. And then a lot of the Orioles' top draft picks over the last few years have been outfielders. 2019, they took Kyle Stowers in the third round. He had a 3-homer day the other day at AAA. He's dominating. He was AAA International League Player of the Week. They took Heston Kjerstad in the first round in 2020. Mm-hmm. Now, he still has not played in a minor league game because unfortunately got myocarditis back in 2020 and then had a hamstring injury, but he is starting his rehab soon. And then in 2021, they took an outfielder, Colton Cowser, who's been playing pretty well at high A. So they just continue to add outfielders, and it's basically now or never for Yusniel Diaz, and he still can't stay on the field. So if he gets healthy, he's going to be in the big leagues this year because the Orioles are basically at a point where, like, we got to give him a chance. You can't just release him without even letting him play in the big leagues for a month. But he can't even keep himself healthy to do that. And it's really unfortunate. I feel for him. I feel for the Orioles. It's a tough spot they're in.
Yeah. I mean, I've been rooting for him, because you don't want to see someone bust. And there's so many times when a huge player is traded and the prospects that everyone's salivating over, you get the Matt Laportas of the world, who was the big, huge chip in the C. Sabathia trade, or Kyle Drabek, who was the big, huge chip in the Roy Halladay deal. I mean, those are just two examples. I mean, there's so many times when there's a big trade that is made, and you will have every once in a while, like when Sale was traded from Chicago to Boston. Moncada has been a productive player, and Kopech pitched very well for them the other day. Sometimes you get to see it work out. Sometimes you get a team gets fleeced, like the Fernando Tatis deal or the Dansby Swanson deal. But a lot of times the names just sort of fade out. And, before I had you coming on here, I wanted to talk a little bit about the arrival of Rutschman and what that means with some of the prospects that are coming up. And I started thinking of Diaz, thinking like he was supposed to be the centerpiece of the new Orioles outfield. And it wasn't that long ago that deal was made. And so I looked up and I saw, well, he's off to a good start. And then I was like, oh, man's hurt again. The man is hurt again. And it's a shame, because he's obviously someone with talent.
Yeah, he's got a bullet of an arm in the outfield. He hits with a lot of power from the right side. He plays with a lot of passion. He's fun to watch when he's on the field. It's just, if he doesn't get help, and you mentioned those guys like Laporta and Drabek. I mean, you think about it, even those guys, although it didn't go well, got to the big leagues and got their chance. There is a serious possibility where Yusniel Diaz just never plays in the big leagues for the Orioles. Because you look at AAA right now, where he's been on AAA for the past 2 years, but he's on the injured list. The Orioles have 4 solid outfielders in the bigs right now, so there's not really a spot open. There's a chance they trade one of those outfielders. If they do, the guy I mentioned, Kyle Stowers, he's well ahead of Diaz in the pecking order to get called up to the big leagues next. And I don't think the O's are trading more than one of those outfielders. So you look at the outfield right now in the bigs, I don't even know where they fit Diaz in because there's no longer, the 40-man rosters in September. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if he's ever going to get to the big leagues. What would have to happen, Sully, is basically he gets healthy and he just goes on a tear where you can't keep him in AAA. He hits 5 homers in 12 games and is just smashing the baseball. And you say, we got to give this guy a chance. But if that doesn't happen, he could, honestly, I could see them patching Diaz to a trade to maybe up the prospect return from another team. Say, hey, you have an outfield opening. Do you want to take a chance on this former top prospect who we can't play in the big leagues? So it's really unfortunate.
I'm just going to say one last thing because I think that the Orioles should keep a bulk of this team together. We mentioned the bullpen. I think the Santander and the some of these players they should keep together, Mountcastle, to sort of see what kind of foundation that they can have, especially when they make the next move. The one player that I think would be an interesting trade chip would be Mancini. Mancini doesn't have much longer on his contract, so he wouldn't be he has like 1 year left that a team would have control of him for one more year after this year. It's an option thing, but there's no doubt if he gets traded, the option will get activated or whatnot. And he is someone who's a right-handed power hitter. A lot of contenders could use a player like him. Oddly, a team like Boston, their stories woken up recently. So obviously that they're starting to hit, but they've needed a jolt in their offense. The Yankees have needed a jolt in their offense. There's been the Seattle Mariners desperately need a jolt in their offense. So a player like Mancini could become quite an attractive player for some of those teams that have chips to deal. So I would not surprise me if Mancini becomes dealt by the trade deadline. But if I'm Baltimore, and I'm not, I want to dispel that rumor. I actually look at this team and say, do you know what? Let's keep this core together and see what they'll do in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally behind that, and obviously, I'd love to add some pieces. Like they still obviously need to add to this team another starting pitcher, a solid infielder that can play on the left side of the infield and hit the ball. But with
what
the
about
prospects,
Manny Machado?
Well, who could have foreseen that if you extended Manny Machado, you maybe could have had a good player 4 or 5 years down the road. Who could have seen that coming?
Yeah.
But if they can add a couple pieces like that, they got the other prospects coming up who you mentioned, like Hall and Rodriguez into the rotation, hitters like Stowers that I mentioned. It could be fun next year. And it is unfortunate that it's pretty much not a done deal, but everyone has kind of accepted Mancini's getting dealt. He, again, is on the last year of that contract. There's a mutual option for next year, but both sides aren't going to pick it up. He's going to become a free agent after this year, unless, of course, he's traded. Maybe another team would pick it up. But he's hit well this year, and it's such a great story, obviously coming back from the colon cancer and playing as well as he did last year. And he's been hitting even better this year. He's back close to his 2019 levels where he was kind of an all-star snub that year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much you get for him because he's played a little right field this year, Sully, but it hasn't gone great. So he's basically a first baseman, which obviously limits the value. If you can only
DH.
first base or DH exactly, which helps trading him to the National League, of course, now rather than maybe last year. But it's just unfortunate, and the Orioles would get somewhat of a return. But I just think they've gone past extending him because the other thing is Mountcastle is, they hope, just a little bit better version of Mancini. They play the same positions. They're kind of similar hitters. Mountcastle's just younger, and they think even at this point is a little bit better and hopefully will grow into being better than Mancini. So they're kind of in a tough spot, and it's going to hurt in Baltimore when they trade him. I've already started preparing myself, but I do agree that besides him, I would like to see them kind of keep the gang together going into next year.
I think it'd be smart. I think it'd be incredibly smart to keep the gang together just because there's, as I said, you can't be rebuilding forever. You really can't. And at some point, the triggers have to be pulled. But, look at, hey, Connor, you're going to have fun this year. I know the Orioles aren't going to win piddly-poo this year, but this should be a fun year, especially if the Graysons and some of the other players start to eventually become part of the team. There's something fun. I mentioned the 87 Red Sox when I was growing up. And I know Yankee fans have fond memories of the 93 team that didn't win squat, but you saw, something's starting to piece together. For Giant fans, 07 was the year that Bonds broke the records. It was the end of the Bonds era. 08 was a bit of a mess, but it was the arrival of Lincecum and Sandoval, and suddenly it's like, whoa, what's going on here? What's going on here? There's something to be said about that transition year that you can say, all right, they're not good, but wait, just hold on. And Baltimore, I think they're maybe a year or two away from being a legitimate playoff team, and that should be a lot of fun.
It will be. Yeah, it definitely will be. And you mentioned all those years for those teams. It's kind of like 2011 Orioles. 11 years later, that September was awesome. That was the first time I had like a whole lot of fun every night watching the Orioles, and it turned into a great team in 2012. And hopefully that happens, and hopefully they're back. And man, if the Orioles are at least contenders next year, the AL East is going to be just an absolute gauntlet next season.
The AL Beast. Well, look at what is not a gauntlet is enjoying the work of Connor Newcomb, who are the host of Locked On Orioles, and tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Connor Newcomb _ at Locked On Orioles for the Twitter account for the podcast. And of course, wherever you listen to Locked On MLB, you can also listen to Locked On Orioles. You can watch on YouTube, any of your podcast platforms. We are covering this rebuild as I think we've hit rock bottom last year, and the line go up now.
Right. And as I mentioned before, check out Locked On Now. The podcast that has Major League Baseball games where they can recap them with analysis from local experts, including Connor Newcomb, taking fans through the season like no other network. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are available at Locked On MLB Pod. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Talking about the Orioles, which is not necessarily going to be a bad thing. With Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles, this has been the Locked On MLB, Locked On Orioles crossover episode. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.